Yeah, so John, it's great to talk to you. I'm really excited to dive into your project. Why don't we start with you just telling me briefly what this project was and how you got involved and what you kind of do in general?
Yeah. So I got involved in this project because I come from a narrative background and I really wanted to kind of branch off from that and try to find more consistency in my work because given the state of the industry with strikes and whatnot, I went from working all the time to not really working very much. And also I transitioned from being an assistant to wanting to be more of a cinematographer. And so I reached out to a friend of mine who's a tattoo artist, the woman in the video, and I was like, hey, is this something that you'd be interested in? Just gave her an offer for a free video, and she said yes. And this is my attempt at trying to create a video sales letter. I didn't have much experience prior to creating something like that, and I think that I want to take more of a role in documentary. It's just that I'm also trying to find other avenues that can help supply income when, other nets that I've casted aren't catching the fish.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean I think that's super smart. I think we all need to do a lot of different things. Like, I think maybe looking in, it might seem like I'm just shooting documentaries all the time. It's not really true. I mean, I'm doing pieces of branded stuff all the time. I mean, I'm working on network television shows that, are they're cool and they pay the bills, but if I was just in complete control of my time, it's not necessarily what I'd choose to be doing. So I think this concept of being a documentary filmmaker maybe has gotten a bit nebulous for people, and they think that documentary filmmakers are just making docs that they believe in one after the other, when the reality is most people have a bunch of sources of income, and it's we all need day jobs. Like an example I've used on the channel a bunch is Leonardo da Vinci was working for people for his entire life. So, figure out what you got to do to pay the bills, make your own projects on the side because they're probably going to lose money anyways. So, yeah, I
But
think you're doing the right thing.
yeah, at least you'll have something to show potential clients in the future.
Well, that's the big thing. I mean, making spec projects, I think is super, super important, especially when you're trying to go into new directions. I just made a video about this on Monday.
Yeah,
I think
I
like,
watched that
yeah, okay, cool.
right
Yeah,
before this. So
yeah, it's exactly the right thing. Like build up a portfolio of a bunch of spec projects, show them to people, and then eventually the money will follow. But what doesn't work is going, I want to do this, and then waiting for something to come. So you're making all the right moves. So let's just watch this through once because it's only a minute long.
cool.
Become breathing art. How will your tattoo forge connections and tell stories? A tattoo starts with a story and blossoms into timeless art, and I want to help you tell that story. But first, let me tell you a little bit about me. I have been an artist as long as I can remember, drawing, sketching, and character designing since I was a little girl. And I got my first taste of tattooing sophomore year of high school while reading a tattoo magazine. And the rest was history. 10 years later, I am a professional tattoo artist working at Beyond Creations in Fullerton, California. My style is a combination of fine line, illustration, painterly, color, black and gray realism. Tattooing connects people, and that's one of the things that makes it so special. I am the most inspired by interactions I have with family, good company, nature, and simple but pure moments. I value connection, patience, trust, and collaboration. If you are looking for an artist who has these qualities, reach out today and let's make your tattoo dreams a reality. For booking information, email tigerlily_arts@yahoo.com.
Awesome. So that's the first time you've tried to make anything like that?
Second time, I did it about January with a massage therapy clinic, and this was my second iteration of it. And I actually did the interview with her twice. And I messed up and I accidentally deleted all of my audio for her, so I had to go back and reshoot it.
Nightmare.
Um, and so what I found in that experience was the first time we went through an interview, it was just me kind of asking her questions and then coming into an edit and trying to piece it all together to try to make a story out of it. But we went in with that same approach the second time around, and it it was really hard for her on camera because she's kind of like fumbling all over the place. She's like deer in the headlights. And so what we ended up doing is we sort of just like came up with a script based on the answers that she had already provided. And it made for a much more fluid and much easier process for me on the editing. And once, I brought it into Premiere and started shifting things around. So
Cool. Yeah, I mean it's really impressive for not having done it very often. And I guess it was kind of like it wasn't the end of the world that you lost everything because you went through and actually streamlined it the second time.
yeah, and the interview lighting was a lot better the second time around.
Cool. Right off the bat, one thing I really like, I think that's really good about your shooting is where you're positioning. I don't know if you did this intentionally, but with the backlight, was
Mhm.
that an intentional choice you made to shoot
So,
from this angle?
because she's kind of in this corner where she's tattooing, what I had was actually a 300x behind her head, in that like highlight on her hair. It was
Mhm.
coming from that direction. And then that white wall was just kind of giving that bounce, giving her that edge on, that far side of her face.
So this is the 300 is basically bouncing off the wall and then back into her face from this side.
Correct.
Well, it's a great effect. I mean, I think just it's just such a simple thing you can do with dock shooting because you so often can't control the light. Just shooting this way by backlighting everything, it just gives it so much more modeling and depth. I just think it's really well done. So like anytime you're shooting B-roll, it's just a cheap hack. You get the main light source behind and get the shadow side closer to the camera. I'm sure you've heard that advice, but you did it really well here. When we get into your main interview frame, I
Mhm.
feel like I would have actually liked to see even more of that in the interview frame itself because
Mhm.
it's done a really good job of, motivating this light. Like I think it was smart to put the window in the frame because I don't know how far you've gotten in the course, but I talk about, and you work on sets, so you probably have heard this stuff before, but motivating the light, especially when you're using lights in dock, which people will people will accept things in movies that look a little supernatural almost, but in docs, everything is supposed to look real. So showing that light source, I think in some way gives us the ability to accept why there's this sort of big soft light coming across her face. So I think this was really good. Um, the one
Can
thing
I
I
just say
might,
something to that? Oh, okay.
what were you going to say?
I was gonna say I made sure to watch a few of the interview episodes before I did this, and so that kind of gave me the inspiration of seeing the window in the background. For instance, the when you have the painter in doing that whole lighting setup, and then you're setting up that light outside to kind of motivate daylight, and you did that kind of book lighting effect. That kind of gave me the inspiration to kind of go for something like this. And yeah.
Cool. Well, you did good because it does, if this was just a dark background, to me this looks like okay, there's a big light here, right? But for whatever reason, my brain sees this in the corner and it's like, okay, this is where the light's coming from, even though it's not. The only thing I might have tweaked is just it's a little bit hot.
Mm.
So something you could think about in the future is like a shower curtain, or you could use a fancy diffusion fabric, but you might have been able to bring down just a little bit of the harshness here just by even gaff taping, a translucent shower curtain over this window and just sort of leveling it out a little bit. I don't know what the logistics were like. Maybe it wasn't possible, but I think you could have something to think about in the future, just like bringing down that glare a little bit. What camera are you using?
So this was on a FX6 and a FX3.
Great. Yeah, so you've got tons of dynamic range to play with, but it looks like it was just a little overpowering. So that'd be one tip that might work. And I think your last shot, that we looked at, this one,
Hmm.
I love this contrast. Like, I think this just looks so real and organic. And I think the interview frame looks great. But to me, it's just I think you could have done a little bit more of that modeling here, either by
Hmm.
bringing the key a little bit closer to the window so that you had a little bit more shadow on this side of the face. But maybe you wanted a really clean look. It's all about kind of what you're going for. Our goal here is to make a 2D image look 3D, and transitioning from shadow to light just is sort of a cheap hack that you can do to get there. So there's a couple ways you could have done it. Like maybe that this wall here is blocking your ability to move the light over to the side. I'm not sure.
Hmm.
If that was the case,
I'm in a cubby over here, like in where the camera's at, like facing her. I'm in a small, like kind of 6 by 6 little box.
yeah, and that's sort of what Doc's all about, is using, like, you're in these impossible situations and you just kind of got to make it work. So if you can't move the light, if you can move the light, maybe that's the first place to start. If you can't, then negative fill might be the way to go.
So there was some fluorescent overheads, and they were giving this really ugly kind of green. And
Mhm.
I tried to control because like some controlled lighting over here, some controlled lighting over there, and I ended up opting to like have some of them on. But I go to the thrift store and I bought like a couple of black bed sheets and just threw it over the arm of a C stand and hoisted it up, and I actually have it more or less on the neg fill side of her face, blocking one of the lights that I was using just to kind of fill some of the atmosphere of like the paint bottles behind her.
So I can actually see it now that you mention it, right? Like right around here, we have this shadow line, and I really, really like it. I think for my taste anyways, and this is just personal taste, I think then it's the light position, right? I think
Mm,
it's that neg fill is being overpowered by the light being a little frontal. This look would be great for something much brighter and more, just something like a bright feeling thing. But to me, tattooing, I don't know, kind of lends itself to a little bit more grit. So the only other lighting thing that I would say is that her eyes are really dark, just
so
naturally.
yeah, I had an MC like on a C stand that I tried to just like give a little bit of pop, and I didn't throw it in until like halfway through the interview. So this may have been where it wasn't showing up, or even so I had like the soft box on it, so
Yeah.
it wasn't as punchy as it could have been.
Let's see. Okay, so later,
Okay,
maybe
yeah,
you can see it
yeah.
starting to pick up here. All right, so you had the right idea. You knew what you were doing. I think you could have probably gone just a little bit more with the highlight, um, just to, yeah, bring it out, especially with people with really dark features, and especially people with dark eyes. It can make them seem, I don't know, a little flat feeling. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah, that would be the next minor tweak, is just to really try and get that eye light to pop, just so that if people watching don't know what I'm talking about, an eye light is basically just that little, um, a little accent of light reflected in their eyeball. Like if we look at this frame, you can see it just in there and just here. But I think it could have been just a touch stronger. But it seems like you had the right idea, and you knew what you were trying to do anyways, even if it didn't work quite like you wanted it to.
Yeah, came in a
Um,
little slow, but it got in there.
yeah, no, it's great. And then, the only other thing that maybe would have been cool is, and maybe didn't have the fixtures for it, is just I really like all of these bottles here. I think they speak a lot to, her profession, and they're just a little dark.
Mm,
Maybe just a subtle little pop of something, maybe a complementary color, because it's quite a cool frame overall, right? Like on the color temperature
mm,
base, it's quite blue. So maybe a little pop of warmer light, maybe like a 3200 balanced thing, just to fill in these bottles here, could have made some nice contrast between the sort of cold blue and the warmth over here.
So how I had the lights is I actually had a 600D on, I guess, frame right. And
Hmm.
then that neg fill was almost like above that 600D, blocking off a fluorescent overhead.
Okay.
And then I had a 300X in the direction of the window, frame left, pointed at her, giving her that kind of edge on her face. And that was
What,
about, well, and then the MC on a C stand trying to bounce into her eye.
so what's the 600 doing? The 600 is
It's
camera right.
uh the 600 is it was on like a an octagon uh softbox, and it's basically giving her all that kind of even light on her face.
Hmm.
Um
Okay, okay, I got you. So it's not that this key light over here is really frontal. It's that there's a second big softbox off to the right. Okay,
Correct.
cool. I mean, I think I think that her face is like well exposed and it's a solid look. It just to me feels a little bit more like polished and a little brighter than maybe the background and the subject matter. And then the last thing I'm going to say before I open it up to just your general sort of career questions and whatever you had in mind, and if you want to ask me, about this frame as well, I think, and it might be because of the geometry as well, but I feel like the eye line is a little bit too extreme. Like you're sitting off this way, right?
I was sitting actually right behind the camera, this
Uh-huh.
camera, and because we went for like her reading off of a script, she kind of set up her iPhone on like a tripod so that she could read it, but still kind of give the illusion like she's talking to someone.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's really smart actually. It's like a poor man's teleprompter. Um,
Exactly.
I think I think we just need to bring that angle a little bit closer to camera. You're
Hmm.
probably sitting almost in the right spot for her to talk to, but because of where the phone is, it's just, she's looking off at quite a sharp angle. And
Hmm.
when we get into the tight shot, it's almost like it's almost parallel.
So I took another page out of your book, and I feel like previously when I would do interviews, I'd have one angle that would be kind of frontal on them, and the other one would be very far off,
Uh-huh.
almost like profile-y. And so this was my attempt at like bringing the camera right next to it, right next, like A and B camera right next to each other. And this is what that is, only to your point of too sharp of an angle. I think that's where she's just a little bit too, like knees are too far to her right and not enough left for that this B camera to kind of emphasize like more of her face rather than like that sharp angle you were talking about.
But overall, I think it's really solid. I think you did a great job. And I think she must have been happy, no?
Yeah, she was
Yeah.
really happy.
For a free ad, she must have been like, well, this is great. Yeah, man, I would just keep doing this exact same thing. Like I would keep finding more people. They could be businesses. If your goal is to make money, then businesses, I think, is the way to go. I'd be really curious to see what you did with a story, like a almost like a day in the life thing. Like even with the same person or a friend or something. Like I'd love to see what you did with uh more of a narrative doc,
Hmm.
as opposed to a piece of branded. And I really like, I mean, the B-roll and stuff I think is really well done. I think you got some really great details, some really great cutaways. I think you show the texture of the job really well. I like the angles you've chosen. I like the direction of the light. Like I like again, we're going from dark to bright, like you've backlit everything nicely. The only thing I'm missing with your B-roll coverage is more of a sense of her working in her space. There's one there's one medium, yeah, there's one medium-ish shot, but apart from this, everything's super tight.
Yeah.
So it might be that you have this stuff and just didn't want to use it in the edit. But I think one, we talk about shot variety and coverage. I think one wider perspective to really place her in the environment, and then everything else can be mega tight, but it's just hard to get a sense of where she's actually working, because we're sort of at the macro level for
I
most of
was
the
using a
stuff.
macro, so
Yeah, and I think it
yeah.
was the perfect choice. I think most of it should be that. We want to focus on our work, but it's really just what the only thing I'm missing is a sense of place, if that makes sense in your coverage. And it's those sort of large wides that you only have to show once, but that really just show the audience where they are, and then everything else super tight. Yeah, so that's all I got when it comes to this. Are there any specific questions about the frame, or do you want to just go into any of your general career questions that you mentioned?
Um, I think that we covered most of what I was looking for in this piece. I more or less like did it in a day and not like a whole lot of planning going into it. So this was just kind of like getting thrown into it and making it happen and trying to, meet the deadline of, you know, bringing a project to the doc hub.
Man, you crushed it. I mean, for one day, this is exactly what everybody needs to be doing. Like, find things that are accessible, close to you, that you can work on without like people. I know I always talk to people and they're like, "Oh, I've got an idea for this thing in Papua New Guinea." And you're like, "No, man, that's going to be so expensive and you're never going to get that done." Find things that are close to you that are accessible and make a ton of them. And I'd really love to take it one step further and actually tell, a story about one of these people too. I think that'd be really interesting. Um, but yeah, fantastic job. So why don't I close this up and then Zoom's going to boot us in 7.5 minutes, but let's get into
Oh,
some
okay.
of how can I help you with your
Yeah.
general moves.
So, a question that I have for you is, do you have a daily routine that you follow, like religiously? And like, what does that look like? I'm going through a point in my life where I'm like trying to master myself. And I feel like by mastering myself, I'll have like a better grasp on being able to master my business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a good instinct. I do. Yes. Short answer, yes. I have a very regular routine. Yes and no, I should say. When I'm at home, I have a very regular routine. And then it all goes out the window as soon as I go to work, which I'm sure you know from your time on set. But when I'm at home, I find a routine like really, really grounding, because these careers and these moves you have to make, like whether it's, planning a film, writing a script for YouTube, editing, whatever, everything progresses through small chunks of work. Like, I think people think that you're going to do this huge thing all at once, but the best things are really just chipping away at stuff for like 2, 3 hours a day. So, you can write a book in a year with 3 hours of work a day. It's not about 16-hour bursts and then nothing. So my routine is pretty, pretty much the same all the time, as long as I'm here. And even when am shooting, I'll try to get up early enough to make it happen. But it's basically get up, spend the first, say, 40 minutes of the day reading. I read and drink coffee. Reading, especially fiction and nonfiction, is such a great way to generate ideas and to see how, you get ideas for stories. You're going to get empathy, which I think is doc filmmaking's and narrative filmmaking too. But without empathy, without the ability to imagine what it would be like to be someone else, doc filmmaking, I think, is a real challenge, because they just seem like a stranger to you. And how can you really get at the core of their experience if you can't put yourself in their position? So always make time for reading. And I find if I just put it off, it's so easy to not do it. So read in the morning, then some type of exercise, a lot of walking, but I also try and do some sort of strength thing like kettlebells or something like that, just because doc filmmaking is so physical. Um, Carrying a camera all day for 12 hours, running out around in the world, will just drain you.
Hmm.
So some sort of exercise. And then it's usually a coffee shop, force myself to get out of the house, go to a coffee shop for maybe an hour or two. Typically, that's where I do all the YouTube work, because YouTube is really just writing. I mean, everything is downstream
Hmm.
of writing in YouTube. So I'll sit there and I'll write for an hour and a half to 2 hours a day. And then after that, the routine part is sort of sort of done, and then I schedule all the non-creative work for 12 o'clock, sort of 11 or 12 onwards. So get up really early, do all that, maybe 6:30 I try to get up, do
Hmm.
all that stuff. And then in the second half of the day is when I'll do the less creative things. So meetings, um, editing and computer work, things that are just sort of process based, I'll push off to the afternoon. Um, and then a lot of walking. I find
Yeah,
walking,
I walk a lot too.
yeah,
It's
walking is
easy to
huge.
just, yeah, get out and do, and it doesn't take up, I mean, it's can be as long or as short as you want. So,
Totally. And it's not just the health aspect of it, it's like the mental side of it, right? Like when I have a problem that I can't figure out, if I just stay in front of my laptop, I don't really make progress. I just spin myself up into more and more anxiety over it. Whereas if I just go for a 45-minute walk with no headphones and I just like let my brain wander on the problem, most times I find I come out with an answer, or at least I feel better, which is
yeah,
almost the
I
same thing as a solution.
I'll
Um,
do a voice recording sometimes and just like talk to myself as if I'm talking to someone about what I'm trying to work through.
yeah.
But okay, I think that answers that. While I still have you for another 2 minutes, you kind of briefly touched on it. Uh, if you don't have a project, how do you still keep that creative muscle pumped? You know, something other than going out and shooting. You kind of talked about with reading, and maybe a little bit with walking. Is there anything that you kind of like go to, like that's what you prioritize when you're trying to be creative?
Yeah, well, really, that's why the YouTube channel exists. It was during COVID, and like you're familiar with, everything went away. I went from shooting 200 days a year to nothing, and it was driving me crazy. And in general, I don't feel good if I'm not creating stuff. And that's YouTube was the perfect solution for that for me. I didn't. I started it with a business mindset, but I didn't expect anything to happen really. I just committed to a video a week for 2 years, and I found that the process of making these videos satisfied all those needs. It was thinking about topics, figuring out how to communicate them efficiently, and writing and just continuously making stuff. And it's probably one of the best decisions I ever made. Not from a business standpoint, but just from a sanity and creative standpoint. Like when I come back from these shoots, instead of just sitting around, you know, hanging out and watching TV, waiting for the next job, I have something that's steady and consistent. And I think overall, it's made me better at everything. So
Yeah.
yeah, YouTube can be great for that. Hard to grow, hard to stand out these days, but a good exercise for staying productive.
Cool. Well, we don't have a lot of time, so I'll just kind of, leave it at that. Thank you for answering the questions and, appreciate your time and giving the feedback.
Absolutely, man. It was great to talk to you, and we'll hopefully do it again sometime. I'm going to keep doing these contests or whatever you want to call them. So yeah, always good to talk. Next time we'll get a little deeper.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, great, man. Nice to talk to you. See you soon.
Thanks, Luke. Have a good weekend.
Bye.